Welcome back.
Hi.
I think if anyone has any questions at this time, feel free to submit them via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen on this webinar. I'll go ahead and get the ball rolling. At this point, I wanted to talk about well, books in general. So you've all written a book aside from publishing literature, a book for just the general lay public. But aside from that, do you have any favorite pieces of literature that you've read in the past for pleasure? And also, why do you enjoy those books?
Maybe if I start at one of the things is like, if you haven't read it yet, reading Cosmos by Carl Sagan or The Demon Haunted World, Science Like a Candle in the Dark, are two of my favorite books. There's a lot of other excellent books out there written often by scientists who take you in and who bring you to the story and who explain to you something that you haven't seen before. But I think Cosmos from Carl Sagan and The Demon Hunted World, just explaining how important science is, are two of my favorites. So still.
Well, I'm happy to go after you then. As you know, I can try to appear very literate with all the 15,000 books I own, but I do have favorites, two in science and two nonfiction. So my two favorite science books, number one is The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes. It's been out for 25 years. To this day, I read it often, and it's one of the most incredible journeys to take. And I learned so much about physicists, by the way, from it. Second, my favorite science book is by my own colleague and co-worker, and we share a lab together, Siddhartha Mukherjee's Emperor of All Maladies, and of course, Gene and Intimate History, his second book as well. I'm a huge Sid Mukherjee admirer. And even though we work on a daily basis together, I can never have enough good conversations with him. And in terms of fiction, you'll be surprised that my two favorites or three favorites are Don Quixote, Moby Dick, and the Brothers Karamazov. So I'm a serious non-fiction reader and fiction reader, I'm afraid. All right, that's it for me. Go ahead.
In true Columbia fashion, Don Quixote is a classic at Columbia. Dr. Suskin, would you like to go ahead?
You caught me off guard. Yeah, I don't read a lot of science books. I do science all day, and I tend to, in the evening, want to read something. I often read with my wife. I read to her quite a lot. And she's not a scientist, but a book that we really did enjoy is a book about Paul Dirac. Paul Dirac was one of the great physicists of the 20th century. Some people think he was second only to, I was going to say second only to God. No, second only to Einstein. And Paul Dirac was a man with, who was, as they say, on the spectrum with a fairly, what's the right word, Aspergerish kind of personality. I knew him a little bit, just a little bit. But there was a very, very excellent book that tells you, first of all, it will give you a lot of feel for things that physicists do, but it also creates a marvelous personality around this man, Paul Dirac. It's called The Strangest Man. And I highly recommend it to anybody, first of all, who wants to understand about very, very high performing Asperger type people. And you get a real human sense of this person. So I enjoyed that a great deal. I read it recently, and I happened to have read it to my wife, who was not a scientist, and just thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dr. Suskin. Dr. Weinberg, would you like to comment? Dr. Weinberg, I believe you're muted. I apologize.
In a rare moment of confession, I must say that one of the tragedies of my life is I've given up reading books for decades. I just haven't had the time, and I think it's pretty sad, but you can't do everything in life, and that's one of the things I've had to give up just to make room for the other things in my life. And so I'm going to withdraw from this conversation and let the others three panelists talk about their books, because I fear I don't really have one that has made an impression on me for decades, sadly enough.
Annabella, my friend Ed Gelman, when I asked him, Ed, what's the book you've read recently? He goes, Azra. The only books I read now are the ones that my wife throws at me.
Oh, I know that, yes.
Well, that's a wonderful way to handle a book being thrown at you. This actually, one of my colleagues pointed out that there seems to be a theme in this talk. It's either black holes or cancer biology. And so this next question is specific for black holes. Someone asked, could you elaborate on the black hole firewall theory?
Well, the black hole firewall theory was, it was very, very much like Hawking's original puzzle, what's like a paradox about information getting out of a black hole. It was a deep and important question. It turned out that the answer was very different than the people who created the paradox thought. There does not seem to be any reason to think there are firewalls. A firewall just meant, roughly speaking, the end of space, that you can't penetrate through the horizon of a black hole because there just is no space there. And the reason that people came to this conclusion, which, as I said, was wrong, had to do with a highly quantum mechanical phenomenon called entanglement. The idea was that as a black hole evaporates, this was Hawking's great contribution, as a black hole evaporates, as more and more radiation gets sent out into space, and this radiation is entangled with the black hole. That's not unusual. It's not something particular to black holes. Anything which radiates, what's left over will be entangled with the radiation that goes out. But the black hole was kind of special. It has an inside, which is supposed to be not terribly hot and so forth. And the idea that the black hole was entangled with its own radiation led to a paradox. It led to the paradox. It's not easy for me to explain. I can't give you a lesson in entanglement in black holes right now. But I can tell you what it seemed to say to those who thought about it was that the black hole must not have an interior. It must just be a brick wall at the horizon. And this turned out to be wrong. It led to something very interesting. It led to the idea that when systems become entangled, when black holes become entangled, or anything becomes entangled, it creates wormholes between those objects, things that we call wormholes. That seems to be the current consensus now, that the solution to the famous, it's called the AMPS paradox. I should tell you who was involved. There were two young students, Almeri and Sully, that's their last names, I know them both well, and one very famous physicist, Joe Polchinski, who unfortunately recently died, and Don Morolf. Those were senior people. So it was called AMPS. AMPS for Almeri, A.M. Morolf, Polchinski, and Sully. The paradox that they discovered was the solution to it was not what they thought. It was not that there are firewalls at the boundary of the black hole. It's that these kind of what were called Einstein-Rosen bridges, otherwise known as wormholes, can, under certain circumstances, connect entangled systems. So this is, again, all the rage today. It's one of the dominant ideas of theoretical physics. But the thing that I find so interesting about it from a human point of view is that, first of all, neither Hawking nor Polchinski and his friends were afraid to say something that might be wrong. They were bold. They saw a pattern, and a pattern of what looked to them like inconsistency, and they got up and said so. These were two very, very deep observations about nature. The fact that in the end they were wrong about the solution, I think, does not detract from the importance of their observations. So as I said, I found both Hawking and the AMPS people to have been very, very admirable in their courage to put forward a paradox and then to make an attempt to solve it, even if the solution was wrong. We learned so much from it.
Thank you very much. And on the other side, I have a question from actually one of my lab mates. And he says that, thank you for sharing your story, Dr. Weinberg. He particularly enjoyed it as he has come to cancer research by happenstance. He trained scientifically as a chemist, then found himself in veterinary medicine, practiced for 6 years. He's asking for advice on how to hold on to this passion for tinkering in the current climate of fast-paced research, especially in cancer biology. And if you would like to begin.
Well, this passion for tinkering and exploring and noodling, as it's sometimes called, is hardly encouraged by current funding practices. If you want to get funds for research these days, as you may all know, you need to describe, in the case of cancer research, in a proposal to the National Institutes of Health, precisely what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and on what timetable. And the truth of the matter is that if you're somebody who likes to tinker and move in unpredicted directions, by the time you receive the funds that you applied for, you long ago forgot what your proposed work was going to be. And so the fact that the NIH doesn't really hold your feet to the fire by forcing you to do what you proposed to do with the funds that were awarded is to their credit. Nonetheless, there are funding agencies that want you to do over the 5 years subsequent to the awarding of a grant exactly what you thought you would be doing, which, to state the obvious, is one very effective way of stifling creativity. So somehow you have to free yourself from the tyranny of these funds and allow your mind to wander. And as Dr. Kaltenegger said before, you have to mix with different people. Her mixtures have come from moving to different corners of the globe. My mixtures with different people have come from jet setting to different meetings across the globe and meeting different people and talking with them. And why is that important? Because to the extent that any one of us introduces something interesting and innovative and creative in any one of our fields, more often than not, it comes from bringing something from somebody else's field into one's own field, something that somebody else is talking about that no one ever thought had a connection with what one was doing, and suddenly realize there is a connection there, and capitalizing on that novel information by fusing together two previously unconnected ideas and generating something new and novel and truly creative. So tinkering is very important to my mind for a truly creative scientific research career. Thanks.
Thank you,
Boy,
Dr.
do I second that. I think what Robert said is exactly right.
Definitely. And I recall, Dr. Raza, in your book, you talked about looking to different sources for funding in order to better unfetter your interests in like a way that was more conducive to how you wanted to run things. Would you mind commenting a bit about that?
I also agree with Dr. Weinberg that it's very important to just find your passion, and then you have no choice. You just have to do what you have to do. I have been interested in ants since I was growing up. And I think I became a myrmecophile by the time I was a teenager. I knew more about ants than I know about anything else. And when I came to America, one of the first things I did is to go and meet the great ant-man, Dr. Ed Wilson, and saw his the ant farm and that he had established at the Institute of Comparative Zoology, where he was the director at the time at Harvard. I do think that bringing together evolutionary biology, embryology specifically, in addition to oncology, molecular biology, all of the fields as such are very important. But to me, the topic of my talk was the patient must remain front and center for physicians. And in order to be able to have the kind of empathy, one has to poach on the experience of others through reading books of fiction, for example. And that's how you learn to stand in the shoes of others. When you read The Great Gatsby, you don't think it's a book about adultery, but you think about the complexity of life and the decisions you have to make, and how the moment of gratification can never match the vastness of your desire, and all the things that you had been trying to do cannot be summed up by a moment. So I do think that I have never felt confined by having to do one thing obsessively, but rather to read whatever I wanted to, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, whether it's paleoanthropology that I got interested in. In terms of getting grants and money to do the research, I think that a very important thing for me has always been that art is I, but science is we. And so collaborative efforts, getting a consensus built around what you think can help your patients, and getting the right kind of expertise from different disciplines all together to attack the same issue from multiple angles, those kinds of things really are give you a lot more confidence, and give other people a lot more confidence to invest large sums of money. So my advice to young people would be, it's good to go it alone and be individualistic and tinker with this or that. But on the other hand, also try to really learn as much as you can all the time, and work with people, work together with others.
Thank you, Dr. Raza. This next question is for everyone. And it is, what is some advice you have for undergrads, specifically freshmen? If you could travel back in time and tell yourself a piece of advice, what would it be? Dr. Kaltenegger, if you would like to begin.
I was about to say, let's go with the more senior people first, who have like more experience in this, but that's I think, honestly, like one of the advice that I would give my younger self is that I think a lot of people will figure that out throughout their career. One thing that would be really good, there are two things that are really good. One is, as soon as possible, get selective hearing, because there's a lot of people who will tell you something that you should not, somebody says, oh, that work was bad, or, oh, why are you doing this? This is like, not, this is a waste of your time, and so on and so forth. And you know, it's something that you want to do, it's interesting, but if many, many people talk to you about this, right, if you don't get the selective hearing early enough that you actually value the input of people, that you give that weight, and you say, okay, this mentor that I really agree with, says, look, I think you've gone in the wrong direction, you should consider this as this. Fair enough, but kind of try to get on selective hearing. Otherwise, the easiest, it's much easier said than done. And I think also, if there's minorities, that's usually a much bigger problem than because they just sometimes get more good advice that might not be as good. But just to say, selective hearing. And the other thing that I found that an older astronomer at the CFA told me is like, well, if you show up, show up. So if you go to a talk, get involved, like be present, like be there and actually ask questions, sit wherever you want, but try to get involved. Try to not like be like in the last row and just be there where nobody knows you're there. You're not interacting with anybody, you're not adding anything to it. Of course, sometimes you don't know what's going on, and so listen, don't just speak, but get involved if it's something that you're interested in, and get involved in, just, again, this is something that I think you learn with age. If you say something stupid, that's okay, or that you perceive as being not highly intelligent after, that's okay. If you asking that, probably 10, 50 more people had the same question because something isn't clear. So, selective hearing, I think, first, and then second, really try to be involved when you show up.
Thank you.
I have some other advice. The first years of college are one of the last times in your whole life where you will find out, you have the freedom to actually explore and find out what you really like and what really is not so interesting for you. So you have to remember, this is a very unique period in your life where you can do a little exploring and begin to figure out what suits your brain, what suits your personality, and what is just something that you have no affinity for. And so I urge undergraduates to explore in their first couple of years of undergraduate life their various career possibilities in terms of taking introductory courses, survey courses in different areas to discover what they're really good at. By the way, once you make such a decision and you go into graduate school in a specialized area, what graduate school really teaches you is whether you're really going to be good at something or not. Experience. It's not a broadening experience, it's a rather narrowing experience, but it will tell you definitively, am I really suited to do what I thought I really would like to be doing? So there's these different periods in life where you're examining yourself, albeit in different ways.
My turn?
Indeed, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'll give you one small piece of advice. There's been many times in my career, many times in my career. In fact, it happens a couple of times a month that I get frustrated. I can't figure out the solution to the problem I'm trying to solve. I get burned out. I get tired of it and I want to do something else. At first, what I used to do is resist that. I say, gotta push. No, when you get burned out and you feel burned out, just stop. Take a vacation, do something else, watch a movie, spend 3 days at surfing. I don't care what it is. You'll usually find at the end of that, you're anxious to get back to it. And what's more, you probably have a good idea. So my advice is don't panic if you start getting burned out and feel like you can't get anywhere. Just take a rest, do something else.
Thank you. Dr. Raza.
Well, mine is very much what I said earlier. I think what has helped me understand things around me a bit better, I think, is just through reading. It's such an amazing experience to open a book and you can be transported into the 12th century versus you can be transported into the future through reading science fiction. But it's just phenomenal. Learning to understand the human condition is so important. And I'll just quote something from one of my favorite essayists, Montaigne, who was a French philosopher and essayist, who said something like, I who embrace the wonders of life so dearly and so eagerly, find in them, when I examine so minutely, little more than wind. But what of that? We are all wind. And the wind itself, wiser than we, takes its pleasure in blustering around. It does not seek solidity and stability, qualities that do not belong to it. And so my advice to you is just be yourself and don't have small goals like I must become assistant professor somewhere or get this grant or publish this paper in Nature. Your goals should be much larger than that. Your aims should be, your vision should be much grander than that. And that requires a lot of hard work all the time. Just don't be afraid of working hard. It's fun. In fact, work becomes more fun than fun itself when you're really enjoying it. So hard work doesn't feel like hard work. And read for pleasure, read for learning, read for curiosity, just read. I think you will find that with time, it's like the expressionist, post-expressionist paintings, little things, strokes will eventually form beautiful pictures that will appear and things will start to fall into place. And one of the lessons I learned from Moby Dick, besides understanding to some degree what is it in the souls of men that forces them to go whaling, in addition to that was the whole idea of Moby Dick, the whale, as being a metaphor for life itself that is challenging you and trying to crush you, and you are in a boat, but the oars are in your hands. And remember that every action you take, every decision you make is going to have consequences. So even small decisions are very important for you to pay attention to think about, to take advice about. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of enjoying life and just jump in and live life to the full.
Thank you, Dr. Raza. The next question is it's from an anonymous attendee. However, they say this is for Dr. Suskind, and they say that they are a huge fan and you are an amazing person and a great physicist whom I look up to a lot. This
you.
person is asking, what is some advice you have for freshman physics majors?
Eat well, get a lot of rest, sleep a lot, and have fun. How about that?
That's some sound advice.
Do you know how many messages I get every day in the email asking me for advice? And I don't have any advice. You just, somebody said, be yourself. And I can't tell you what to do. You figure it out yourself.
It is our that is very true. It is our own paths to find. So someone else is asking about your path to becoming a professor. What are some highlights and would you do anything differently?
Is that for me particularly or anybody?
That's for anybody and also everybody. So if you would like to go ahead, you may.
My experience was basically an experience of luck. I did everything wrong and always somebody came to my rescue. The reason was because I had a certain talent for thinking about physical problems. And so from the beginning, practically, I was a bad student. I think Robert said he was also a bad student. I was a very bad student. I didn't do my homework. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I didn't pay attention. I actually didn't even know that I was supposed to get a job when I finished graduate school. I thought so. I was lucky. I was just plain lucky, and my experience should not be taken as something that other people should emulate. I was lucky, and here I am now, still being pretty lucky. So, yeah, I could think of some turning points in my career, but most of them were of the sort where I should have failed, and by some piece of luck, I managed to scrape through. I'm not sure what that says to other people, but it is true.
Well, I'll go next before Lisa because she'll be so impressive that I'll feel an inferiority complex immediately. But in reality, I came to this country as a 24-year-old Muslim woman, immigrant with an accent. But the beauty of this country, of course, is that it's a meritocracy. If you have a new idea and you can do things and you can show that you have credibility, then I could compete with my colleagues who went through the perfect systems here, even though I was an immigrant. And so I was very lucky in the sense that I landed in America, but of course it was very much planned because it is the only country affluent enough to be able to throw a lot of money into research of the kind I wanted to do. So I think my path was really come here and work as hard as possible in what I love to do, which is oncology. And I was studying leukemias, and then the ideas that come automatically lead to the kind of research path that that has the potential for delivering the kind of things you're asking about, professorships and endowed chairs. In fact, I got my first endowed chair when I was 39. And being a Muslim immigrant woman was and colored at that, everyone would have thought that's the last thing that would happen. In fact, one of my relatives in Pakistan told me, why wasn't I not a rich doctor instead of being what she said is a witch doctor? What are you doing in the labs? We sent you there to make a lot of money type thing. But I think that path to professorship, the way you are asking, is the path that we have been discussing throughout, which is the path to following your try to do justice if you have taken the oath to serve humanity, to be sincere and faithful and devoted, and to do it with the best of your ability.
Thank you, Dr. Raza. Dr. Kaltenegger, I believe, were you about to?
Perfectly fine. I think if you go by what is the hot topic, right? What you think people will hire for, what you think somebody's interested in, you generally will never be as good in it, because if it's not something that resonates with you, like you're fascinated by, because it's just a topic that for whatever reason, and sometimes you can't even explain, it speaks to you, you want to know more about it. That's if you can find that. And exactly that was the point, right? That, for example, we just made before, try to get involved in different intro courses, try to get involved in research in the lab, right? Just to put your toe in the water to figure out what that one thing might be that is really interesting for you. And undergrad is a great time. The universities are done exactly for that. You can tip your toe in the water, and yes, don't tell everybody at home all the courses you're taking if they're like way off what they expect you to take, as we just heard before, right? But you can also just get that information, that different viewpoint, to help make you see a problem that everybody has seen before, just differently. And that sometimes actually leads to you finding a solution that nobody else has thought before, because they haven't thought about it that way. So one of the things why I founded the Kaltenegger Institute here at Cornell with, as I said, like 15 different departments, right, is because I am trained as an astrophysicist and as a physicist. And after a while, with your best intentions, that training leaves a certain stamp on you, because you see things in a different way, the way you were trained to see them, like you break down problems in a specific way. And the best way you can get out of that is having friends or colleagues who were trained a different way. So you just move everybody together, and then all these different viewpoints break out these blinders that you had on. And so what will you do trying to get maybe to a professorship, to a professional? So also let me say, professorship is not the only one. It looks like it because you're the university and everybody you surround yourself with happen to have become a professor, right? But there's a lot of really great work, whether it's in research lab, whether it's in industry, whether it's anywhere, right? So the problem is you have a kind of biased view when you're at university, because everybody who can tell you about their work happens to be a professor. So try to get to know the interesting people at the university, the interesting undergrads, the person who does something completely different than you do, because all of a sudden you're like, ooh, either that's really interesting, or you learn something that, I don't know, 5 years later, you're like, ooh, I should really contact that person and see if we wanted to work together, the right team, as Dr. Raza was saying, right? Lots of different people thinking, oh, this is the way we do it. So use that opportunity, if at all possible, not just to study, but to get to know whatever speaks to you in terms of most interesting, most diverse people that you can while you're at a university, because it's usually a unique place. There are not many places like universities where you can find all these different diverse people with different views and interests, and then pick and choose what you find most interesting. And the worst is, it's always going to be an interesting dinner conversation, right? If that's the worst that happens, at least you're not going to be bored.
No, the worst is that it's an enigma into incompletion. It's a journey into irresolution. There's going to be no calm of consummation for you. Once you're on the road, you'll always be on the road. Just remember that. And it's fun. It's the only Zen you find on top of the mountains is the Zen you brought with you.
That is fantastic. Thank you, both Dr. Kaltenegger and Dr. Raza. Bob, would you like to comment?
Well, the last thing you should do is to become a professor because your parents wanted you to become one. You might think that the work of a professor is a glorious one and always enriching, but it's a mixed bag. One of the things that's important as a professor is to teach. And if you don't really enjoy teaching, and many people don't or aren't good at it, then you shouldn't be doing it. You shouldn't be putting yourself as a square peg into a round hole by doing things which, for various cultural reasons, you thought you needed to do. And the other thing I wanted to say is, whatever you choose to do in life in terms of the specialty you fit into or the problem you work on, recognize it's a bit of an accident. It's serendipitous. You happen to meet this person. You happen to meet that person. It was not preordained in the scheme of the universe that you would work on this or that. It's all a bit of an accident. And if you find something you like doing, go with it. We're all the products of accidents of which sperm hit which egg in our mother's womb. And so you have to realize how accidental and things are in life, and how if you can find something that's very satisfying, grab hold of it and do it.
You know, I get a lot of email from people with exactly the opposite problem of what Robert just described. He said, don't become a professor because your parents want you to. I get a lot of email from young people who say, I want to become a professor, but my parents don't want me to. Particularly people from certain parts of the world. I won't mention which parts of the world. Lots of them send me email. What can I do? How can I convince my parents? My parents don't want me to become a physicist, but I want to be. I'm afraid that they will disown me, this, that, and the other thing. And I really can't tell them, just go against your parents. I can't tell them that. But what I can tell them is, you know, if you don't do what you want to do, and you don't do what you really want to do, very likely 30 years from now, you're going to deeply regret it. So I don't give them any particular advice, but I do tell them that.
Thank you very much. And while we are coming up on the half hour, so this marks the end of our panel. At this point, I would like to give profuse gratitude to our speakers for spending this time with us and for putting all this effort into their presentation. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are going to have quite a few, wait, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We are going to have one more day of Fall Forum. It will culminate in poster presentation 2, which will take place tomorrow morning. More information is available at the link that I've just sent out in the chat. And we will have an award ceremony tomorrow afternoon as well. To the attendees, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And for the panelists, I'm going to ask that you stay for a few minutes, and I would like to thank you all for joining us this evening. The Sciences Minisymposium is officially done. Thank you. We're just going to give it a minute and let people leave.
Leonard?
Yes.
Leonard, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Do you
can.
know where your family name comes from?
Well, I actually do know exactly where it came from.
It has nothing to do with sweet
Let me
child.
no, okay,
you
you're
know
going to
that?
tell me something. You're going to tell me something I don't know, but let me tell you something else. The family name was not Suskind. It was Soskill. It was a mistake on my father's birth certificate. So that's exactly where it came from. Yeah, it is a nice mistake. But now you can tell me what I'm curious. Go ahead. I'm all ears.
It had nothing to do with sweet child. Lisa
Really?
will know the meaning of it. Nothing at all. It was an Ashkenazi nickname.
Oh.
Nothing. It was an Ashkenazi nickname for Alexander. Got that?
Really?
Yep.
I'm amazed. I always thought I was a sweet child.
No, you don't get that. It's a nickname.
Damn. You just ruined my day. Thank you.
Oh.
No.
Lisa,
how can I confirm that? How can I confirm
you still have a bit of an... Well, you just heard it from the Oracle.
Where did you learn it?
You can look it up.
Where did you learn it?
I've known it 30 years.
Okay, that makes it true.
Well, I've heard it time and again. It's a nickname.
I never heard it. I believe it. I just never heard it.
Well, whatever.
And Soskill? How about Soskill? What is that?
That's something I never heard in my life.
Nobody's ever heard of it.
No.
Anyway, thank you for the information. I'm going to look it up and try to find out.
Thank you all so much for coming. And this was, honestly, this was a hilarious presentation. I'm going to be honest, I was really nervous about how this was going to run. I did a lot of research. I mean, in all honesty, I must confess, I'm sorry, Lisa, I'm sorry, Dr. Suskin. We're both biology majors, both Jonathan and I are. John is in the process of applying to med school, and I concentrate in genetics, genomics development. So I'm not super oriented in like physics at this point in my education, or anything to do with outer space for that matter. So I must confess.
Nor I in biology.
I'm early in my tracks. I haven't taken physics yet. That's something usually juniors take. I'm a sophomore. And so I must confess, I'm just not super, that's why I was so nervous, and I did a lot of research to feel like I could properly have that conversation with you.
Yeah.
But yes,
Well,
I would like to.
sounds like you did
And
your
you did a
homework.
great job, both of you, Jonathan
Thank you.
and Adil. Like you guys did a great job
Yeah.
organizing it, leaving everything, having everything on time, getting like the questions in, getting it all involved, getting all the speakers, and you did an amazing job. Seriously, really, really good. Congratulations.
Thanks, Lisa. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Yes, well, we don't want to take up any more of your time, but I just wanted to be upfront with you all and let you know that we really appreciate your just your efforts and your time, especially since I know
We all
towards the end
enjoyed
it's
it.
a little scrambly.
The other thing I wanted to say is I did sit through all of the lectures and I found them really interesting. Thank you, guys.
Definitely. Well, thank
I'm
you.
going to suggest we end with 2 lines from Emily Dickinson. She says, "A word is dead when it is said, some say. I say it just begins to live that day."
Okay.
May the words live that were spoken here today. Thank you.
Yeah, and all of this is going to be recorded and put on YouTube. So that's
Actually,
having
pardon.
it virtually here.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jonathan. But would you all mind if we took a picture together? I'll just take a
do that.
screenshot. Okay.
Please do.
Pardon?
Please do.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Lisa, while the picture is being taken, what's the mass of the black hole that holds our galaxy together in the middle? How many suns is the mass of that black hole?
I think you should talk to the person below me. So probably Leonard Suskind has the better number on that.
Well, I think the answer is about a couple of million.
Yes, it's a couple of million.
It's not in the billions, but some galaxy, I think Andromeda has a big guy, a real big guy.
And so the interesting thing is, like, what we're learning is also, it's very hard to say, right? Because the galaxy, generally you would say, if you have a planetary system, there's the sun and there's the planets. And so by the movement of the planets, you can say what the movement of the sun is. But galaxies don't work that way because we have this dark matter. And so it's not just straightforward for galaxies further away to figure out how the outer stars move and figure out what the mass in the middle is, because there's also mass we cannot see all around it in kind of like a halo. But for our own galaxy, I think this is why they got the Physics Nobel Prize. And again, I'm talking, Professor Suskin should talk about this more.
No, this is not my wheelhouse, this kind of astronomy.
And so the interesting thing there is that because of the movement of the last stars, so the ones closest to the black hole in the center of the galaxy, if you can figure out how fast they move, then you can figure out and how they move, like you know exactly where they are and how fast they move. You can figure out how much mass, how much gravity it takes for those ones close to the center to actually be held in its place. It's like Einstein, you know, you dent the mass, that's the space-time, mass dents the space-time. Anyway, but so this is why they measured so precisely for only our own solar system, for our own galaxy, for our own Milky Way, that we can, even so it's, as we said, it's a couple of million solar, so I can tell you like 5.8 million, you know, I can say a couple of millions. And if somebody were doing this, like if Brian Gensler was here, he would tell you a better number. But this is how we figure out our own solar system's core, our own galaxy's core. And the key to this is, you know, the gravity, so you know the mass, and you know the orbit of the last stars. Thus, you know what the volume is that you have for that mass. And then you figure out you actually have to push these things closer to, if it's atoms with a core and an electron, that won't work. Even if you push the electron into the core, that won't work. It's still too big. And so then you're going to basically push neutron next to neutron. That's the last matter we can really calculate. And even that is too big. And so there must be something after that that we don't understand. And this is why we call it a singularity. And this is why we say that it's a black hole, because even light can escape if it gets too close to it.
You know how big, the horizon of a Earth-size, Earth mass black hole is? If the Earth were to collapse into a black hole, do you know how big it would be? Its
3
visible
inches.
size? About a peanut. Maybe about a peanut.
But the really cool thing about it is, if the sun were to collapse into a black hole, you know, it would get cold and not bright and dark. But other than that, gravity would happily keep working. So
Oh, yeah.
it would not make any difference, except we wouldn't have any more sunshine, what would be bad on so many levels. But it's kind of fun.
It would be about a mile big.
By the way,
About a mile
Lisa,
big.
the Muslims have a tradition when a new baby is born, the first thing they should hear is the sound of the azan, which is the call to prayers. So when my daughter was born and she was being handed over, that my sister should recite the sound of the azan in her ear, my late husband, Harvey, who was a nice Jewish guy from Brooklyn, grabbed her and started yelling in her ear, quantum gravity, quantum gravity.
And there, a beautiful new family tradition was born.
A new Muslim Jewish tradition was born, quantum gravity. Well, it's been wonderful, Annabella and Jonathan. I also want to put in my words and say you did an amazing job. When my daughter was 22, she couldn't string together Mary Had a Little Lamb. So I don't know where you guys are coming from. You're geniuses. You did a wonderful job of conducting a very interesting and intriguing set of speakers tonight. I feel truly honored to be a participant with the three.
Thank you, Dr. Raza. But also, your daughter is an extremely, extremely like incredible science communicator, like you are. So, not, but thank you very much.
Everyone's daughter is brilliant.
And gorgeous. My mother-in-law would say, gorgeous geniuses. That's all we produce.
Yes. Oh, I never took the picture. I'm so sorry. We got into a wonderful discussion
for that.
about black holes, but I'm sorry. Here, I'll count down so we're all ready.
Waiting for that.
3, 2, 1. Amazing. Thank you.
Good night,
I
everyone.
hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.